Hi, I'm Bradley, part of the team here at the Romford Film Festival, and this evening it's a great pleasure to be speaking to Carl Timms, director of Off Grid. Thank you for being here, Carl.
Hi, Bradley. Yeah, cheers.
So, Off Grid, could you tell us a little bit about, or completely about, what Off Grid is?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the short version is it's a post-apocalyptic supernatural thriller about an old couple who have escaped into the woods following some apocalyptic event that's affected humanity, and it's about their struggle living in isolation to survive, and stuff happens that kind of brings it all crashing down, and that's the kind of non-spoiler version, but we can get to that in a bit, I guess.
And you're okay telling us about the spoiler version?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because it's the essence of the story.
It is.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Could you elaborate then and give us the spoiler version?
Yeah, sure. So the I mean, I haven't been able to talk about this at all, which is great. It's quite refreshing. But the non-spoiler version is actually the main protagonist, John Tanner, has had a mental breakdown, and it's effectively. What we're seeing for the whole film is his view of the world. It's his reality that he's created, and he's actually keeping his wife inadvertently prisoner. She's hurt her leg, she's ill, and by trying to help her and protect her, he's actually slowly killing her. And unfortunately, due to his breakdown, there's a moment in the film where she confronts him with the truth after some awful stuff has happened and he's done some terrible things, and in that moment when she confronts him, there is an act of her reaching out to him and trusting him, where she takes a knife out from behind her back, and actually in that moment, this act of love that she sort of shows to him to try and sort of calm things down inadvertently triggers him killing her, because he sees now that she's joined his reality and is one of them. So basically at that point, his whole reality just crashes down on him.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I still feel as though you were being pretty kind there and not spoiling too much of the essence of the story. So the idea, do we know where the idea came from, the original concept?
So it was an interesting one, because I'd started working with Mark Brendan, the writer, and we were saying we got on really well, and we were saying, well, have we got anything we can work on? And he pulled out a sort of 7-page script that he'd written, which was Off Grid, draft 1, and it was 7 minutes long. It was mostly, I suppose, the same story beats, but it was much quicker, much more to the point, and really John Tanner was just kind of nuts. it was just straight out. He was just a bit nuts, and so although that twist was there, it lacked any kind of emotional grab. The wife was afraid of him, that sort of thing. And actually, when I read it, it was an interesting time, I suppose, in my life, because about 3 months before, I'd lost my granddad to dementia, and when I was reading that script, in my head, I saw the couple as just being an old couple, like it was an elderly couple, and I just thought, this is really great. You don't normally get a story where there's elderly couple that's the kind of protagonists. They're normally side characters, and weirdly, in my head, I also saw James Cosmo in that role. As soon as I read it, I was just like, this needs an old, powerful guy, somebody who's still able to defend his wife with all he's got. And I've been a big fan of James for a long time, and in my head, that's who I saw. And but it was only when I was reading it that I looked at the story, and I just said, I think this can be a bit more here. I think we need to make more of the relationship. And Mark and I worked on that back and forth, and really sort of solidified and expanded. We increased the role of the stranger. And just brought that whole sort of relationship out, so that by the time you get to that twist, you've got to feel it. It's a gut punch. You've got to feel, oh my God, he's doing the one thing in the world he doesn't want to do, which is hurt the woman most precious to him. And by that act, the horrible thing that he does at the end, it's just he's destroyed himself inadvertently. And a lot of that, just as I say, came out of that whole thing. I mean, my granddad obviously didn't do anything to my nan, but it was just that whole. That reality of seeing my granddad just slip away and lose him completely, and we all saw it happen, and I think we just wanted to bring some of that into Tanner's character, this kind of reality, just taking him away from everything he loves, that's what that came.
Thank you. So you mentioned James Cosmo there. Now, independent filmmakers going to go, how can you get an actor like that? Could you tell us how you get such a high-profile actor, and Alison as well? They're really high-profile. How do you go about that?
So it was, I mean, in a way, a slight combination of luck, good timing, you know, all the usual stuff you hear with film, I guess. It's just right place, right time. But I wanted James. I didn't know first clue how to go about getting him. I wrote to his agent, you know, blank, you know, got nothing back, as you'd expect. And I was chatting to a friend of mine who's a producer, Rob Speranza, and he... and I said to him, what if I was going to get named actors involved, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give me? And he said, hire a casting director. And I was like, oh, that's so obvious. Like, and we had a bit of money, we'd done our crowdfunder and we had some private investment. And I was like, okay. And I'd met a casting director in Birmingham at a networking event. So I thought, well, okay, she's the first one I've met, and contacted her, and I basically said, you know, about James Cosmo, and the year before she'd worked with him at the Birmingham Rep. So it was just fortuitous. She read the script, she thought it was great. And obviously a really good opportunity, I think, for somebody of James's. James plays fantastic, but he's always a character actor. Generally plays a lot of side characters. He's always the granddad, the dad, you know. And I think when he read the script, because basically she got me straight past the agent, and that was really interesting. And I got to meet James. We met for a coffee in London and on South Bank, and he loved the script. And I think what really appealed to him was just the idea of being able to actually play a lead in something like this, but also a role that's twofold. You think he's the hero, and actually he's the villain, you know. And I think it gave him a great chance to be physical. He doesn't get to do fighting, like when you see things like Braveheart and stuff, you know, he's throwing people around, and he doesn't get to do a lot of that anymore. But he's still just the most powerful guy, you know, big guy, and he just really liked the idea. So Alison's involvement came from the fact that they'd worked together on a BBC series. He suggested her, so that was, as soon as she found out he was involved, I think she signed on. Mark Bayliss came on board because obviously James and Alison signed on, and it just spirals. And I'd never been through that process before, but it was really interesting to see that it kind of got easier with each actor, because the moment the cast starts to build, everybody's just on board, you know, and yeah, it came together in a way that I couldn't even have imagined at the beginning, really. Yeah, very lucky.
Yeah, that's great, and it's a wonderful performance. James is fantastic in it. He really is strong, and you should see this film. If you haven't seen it, catch this film. It's absolutely superb. So you just slightly touched upon. Can you just elaborate a little bit on how you managed to raise the funds for the film?
Yeah, so it was there was a bit of initial private investment to get us going, which was somebody who just believed in the film and the idea, and obviously when I said, you know, I really want to try and get James involved, and they came on board, and that gave us enough money to pay for the casting director, to just do some of those initial expenses. Once that happened, then we managed to get other private investors, and we decided to run our first crowdfund. Crowdfunding campaign, we aimed high, we went really high with it, and we got 50% of what we were aiming for. So I think we went for 15, we got 7.5. And for anyone who's not done crowdfunding, I can tell you, it's a slog. Like, it is such a slog. It's almost like a full-time job. You are just yelling into the void. You are shaking people by their ankles to get loose change. And you have to be really, really upfront with people. I was going to, you know, I've got quite a few friends on Facebook, people I went to school with years ago. I've never seen them in 20 years. And I just sent them emails just going, can you fund me? This is my dream. You know me, 20 years ago, I was talking about being a director. You know, this is what I want to do. And it's amazing how many people actually step up and just go, yeah, brilliant, I'm so happy for you, this is great, and put money in. But we still only got 50%. So it was enough with the private investment to film, pay the actors, you know, get everything shot in the can. When it came to post, we knew we were going to have a lot of effects to do, because we've got the whole Shining Ones, Loigor, as they're called, effect with the burning blue eyes. If anyone's seen the trailer, it's in that. And I knew from my last short that I did that you have to pay to get good effects. It's really hard to just ask people to do it for free, because it takes a lot of time. And there was something like 96, 98 effect shots in this. Which for a short film I think is quite a lot, and it's amazing how they add up. And so we decided to do a second crowdfunder, and we raised the money, and again hit 50%. So we were still scraping around, you know, at the end. But thankfully everybody decided to, you know, just do it for the love as well as the money, and yeah, we got there. But yeah, it took a long time.
Fantastic. So you've now got a great script. You've got some great actors on board. You kind of almost got your funding, or have got most of your funding at this point. So now we're getting to the logistics of the shoot. Could you just tell us a little bit about how long the shoot was and how long the actors were on the shoot for?
Sure, yeah. So we'd we planned to shoot. It was in May a couple of years ago, and we had managed to get quite lucky in that a few people had come on board. There was a chap, Ian Fisher, who came on board as a consultant for our production design. He works for Sky, does a lot of the big sort of Sky crime shows and things like that. And he helped us out a lot in sorting out the look of the cabin and the interior there. We found that location, which was interior at a kind of holiday retreat cabin, and we redecorated that. The exterior of the cabin was an absolute nightmare, and actually we found it 2 weeks before the shoot. So we'd locked in the actors, we'd locked in absolutely everything, and 2 weeks before the shoot I was going everywhere in Worcestershire, every barn, every shed I saw. I was out walking the countryside just desperately trying to find somewhere, and actually it turned out about 10 minutes from my house was this old scout hut. And I found out about it through just a local person where I live, and we went to look at it, and literally the second I saw it, it was just like elation, because it was just perfect. It was just exactly what I'd pictured, and with a bit of extension and a bit of set work, it looked great, and I was so happy with how that came out. But we were riding that pretty close. Other than that, I mean, the crew came together really well. You know, I used a lot of people I'd worked with on my previous short still, but also a lot of new faces. I mean, it was just a case of networking hard around the area and just calling in a lot of favours and asking for a lot of favours, and I probably owe a lot of people a lot of time for what they did. Yeah,
it was worth it. So you're on set, you're shooting. Were there any major hiccups? Any major challenges, or did it go smooth?
So the biggest challenge we actually had, and it resulted in a reshoot, well, not really a reshoot, an extra shoot 3 months later, was I think we were over ambitious in our planning. So I always get a lot done when I'm directing, because basically I tend to shoot with 2 cameras, which I know is like frowned upon. Like it's just not the thing you do. You know, it's not the way Hollywood works or whatever. But I've always worked with 2 cameras on all my shorts, and that's because I think no matter what shot you think you're lining up, if you get a second angle on it and you've got the opportunity, then it's amazing how much that you end up using in the edits. There was an awful lot of that we ended up using, and I think basically even with 2 cameras, we had one day of the shoot where we were running probably 4 hours late, and when you've got actors of that caliber, asking them to stay around till 2 in the morning was a hell of an ask, and we still had a whole scene to do, and in the end we were just like, we're canning the scene, we'll find out some other way of doing it. And I mean, apart from that, there were a few other sort of minor things here and there, things I learned. I mean, a big lesson I learned was make sure you've got a props master, because we were trying to sort of just do that with the general runners and everybody hanging around. And it's amazing how many times a shovel can go missing or a bottle can go missing, and it turns out somebody's just taking the decision to walk it back to base camp. And you know, so there were little things like that. But I think props master I will have forever on every film I ever do now. But the reshoot, or the extra shoot, came about because we ended up having to go to James and Mark Bayliss and just say, you know, is it okay if we shoot it? We'll shoot it near your house. We'll make it as inconvenient as possible. Oh, no, sorry, as convenient as possible. And they were really up for it. And actually, having had a break, because I think it was quite an intensive 4 days, we got that scene with Mark and James in the woods was shot sort of 3 months later, and I just thought came together really well, because they were just fresh and ready to go, and that really worked out well in the end. And I don't think we would have got that, if I'm honest, where we were shooting previously.
That's really interesting.
So it ended up working out really well.
Thank you. Just a couple more things and then we'll wrap up and let you go. Thank you so much. Who's your influences? Who's your favourite directors? What's your favourite films?
So I'm very much a child of the 70s and 80s, the 80s for me particularly. James Cameron's probably my all-time hero, and I think in a way I've always wanted to make a film that had lots of blue in it, and Off-Grid was my chance to do that. There's lots of blue lighting, kind of blue-white lighting that we did in there, and obviously he's the king at that sort of look, I mean old school sort of, all the 70s 80s Spielberg stuff. I'm a big John Carpenter fan, George Romero, big horror fan, but also just a good fan of that sort of classic 80s look and feel, and I love it.
Okay, one more question for you. What are you working on now, if anything, and when can we look forward to seeing anything next?
So we're working on a few things. So since then we've had a really sort of purple patch in terms of creativity. So we've written 4 features. Which are all at various stages, but effectively good ideas. But the thing I'm most excited about, we're working on an anthology project with 4 other producers and directors in the Midlands, which is, I can't really say too much about it at the moment. I won't give a title, but it's that's a horror anthology. So it's going to be 4 stories with a wraparound, all set in kind of one building apartment block, and we've all written our scripts and we've all shared them, and we're all really happy with it. And I think that's a good sort of set of traditional supernatural horror, good old school kind of stuff. And then I'm also working on a short called Hero, which is actually a lot more family friendly than my last 2. I've done kind of comedy horror, I've done serious horror. This is more of a urban fantasy, and it's about a sick young boy who is defending his family from a fire-breathing monster that wants to eat his family one night. And it's about sort of 10 minutes, but it's going to be a lot of fun pulling that together.
Well, we very much look forward to that, and I hope you submit something next year into the festival.
Yeah, if we're done. It tends to take me a couple of years to get anything done, so it might be.
Well, we look forward to it. We look forward to it.
I'll definitely be back.
For everybody who hasn't seen Off Grid, please catch Off Grid. It's a great film. It's beautifully directed. Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much for coming up and talking to us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah,
Thank you very much.